Bear Grylls is embarrassed that he ever promoted veganism.
He should be embarrassed is what I have to say.
In my last video, I asked you guys if there were any stories or topics you wanted me to cover to please send them my way. And Nikki on Instagram really pulled through. She sent me this story. It was a Fox News article entitled "Bear Grylls Embarrassed by Past Vegan Diet. Says he's never been better with all meat diet." As soon as I saw this headline and that it was in Fox News, I was like, this is gonna be good. And it didn't disappoint. There is lots of food for thought, lots to discuss. The story actually ended up being picked up by and reported on by a lot of different mainstream news publications. So we're going to be looking at all of those and discussing the interview that started it all. First, I want to sort of look at and discuss the no longer vegan phenomenon in media. We're also going to take a look at Bear Grylls' backstory and who he is and how he came to be who he is. I didn't know much about him. Then we're going to delve into his interview and his claims about his newfound health after ditching his vegan diet, and discuss some things I find interesting and concerning about his trajectory and the way he talks about it, and see if there's any validity to the claims he makes. In general, people love these kinds of stories. People eat them up. These stories of, you know, a former vegan sort of publicly shunning veganism. No longer vegan videos are a whole entire genre on YouTube. It's sort of become a running joke within the vegan community at this point, I would say. I think people like these types of stories because it enables them to justify their own stance on veganism, whether that's, you know, anti-vegan, or I could never go vegan, or I wouldn't want to go vegan. I think it sort of gives people justification for not changing their ways, because they're like, well, why would I change if this person did that and came back and is now saying that it wasn't great? And for some reason, we tend to give public figures just more authority, like they know better than us. To be honest, whenever I see these types of headlines, my vegan radar sort of starts to go off. I always think something seems a little suspicious here, and I start questioning, is there any financial incentives at play? This is where some people might start to accuse vegans of going into conspiracy territory. But it is so often the case that these suspicions end up being correct. And I talked about this again just a few weeks ago in the Aubrey Plaza Got Milk video, how there is this sort of different type of media literacy that you have to hone in order to be able to spot these sort of sneaky and insidious ways that animal ag advertises to us. Just a few years ago, when Alyse Parker, who was one of the biggest vegan influencers on YouTube, announced she was no longer vegan, and then shortly after that did a video where she announced she was doing a full carnivore diet for 30 days. This story was huge and splashed across the media and sensationalized, and then when you watch the video you find out it was sponsored by ButcherBox. And that was a little bit more of an overt advertisement, but none of the headlines mentioned that, when the reality is, who knows if she would have done that with or without the ButcherBox sponsorship. So of course my antenna went up with this Bear Grylls story. And did I find a connection with animal ag? We're going to get to that a little later in the video. First, I want to get into Bear Grylls' history. I knew very little about Bear Grylls other than, you know, his sort of persona as a TV survivalist personality, kind of known for doing extreme things. Looking into his life a little bit, it seems like he grew up in a very wealthy, privileged background. His family was a famous cricketing family. I don't know much about British sports, but I think cricketing is pretty up there in terms of elite activities. His dad was also a conservative politician. From an early age, he learned to climb and sail with his father, who was a member of the prestigious Royal Yacht Squadron. He also had a super elite education. So this sort of extremely stuffy, upper crust British upbringing, to me, pretty starkly contrasts with the image of an outdoorsman living off the land. Rich man who never struggled or wanted for anything gets even richer by pretending to struggle and want for things. And I'm not saying at all that he didn't earn his place as a survival expert. It seems like he clearly did. I just think there's something interesting about that. the privilege of being able to cosplay as a survivalist. He did join the British military and he served for a few years, but his service was cut short due to a parachuting injury. He then did a series of adventurous stunts and expeditions, including summiting Mount Everest, circumnavigating the British Isles on jet skis, rowing the Thames River naked in a bathtub to raise money for an injured friend, crossing the Atlantic Ocean in an inflatable boat, holding the highest ever recorded open-air formal dinner party in a hot air balloon, and many other stunts. He published a series of books detailing his adventures, and through that, it seems like he started becoming known for his exploits. He then went on to appear in a series of TV programs, which eventually led to him landing his own show, Born Survivor or Man vs. Wild, depending on which country you lived in. In the US, it was called Man vs. Wild. The show was a huge success, and I think how many of us came to become familiar with him. I think this show is what really made him a household name. The show seemed like it was part Survivor, part Fear Factor. To be honest, I never watched it. These types of shows tend to make me really uncomfortable. I have no interest in living vicariously through people causing themselves to suffer just for the hell of it. And I also associate anyone with a survivalist moniker with killing animals or eating animals, and that's just not something I'd be interested in watching. For example, these are just a few of the things he did on his show: eating snakes, wrestling alligators, field dressing a camel carcass and drinking water from it, eating various creepy crawlies, aka insects, using the corpse of a sheep as a sleeping bag and a flotation device. The entire concept of a survivalist TV show is just very far, in my opinion, from the concept of veganism. What it really comes down to for me is a human needlessly disturbing and disrupting nature. And I'm sure that there are fans of the show who would say, no, he's really respectful of nature. That's a really big part of the show, is that he respects nature and he's at one with it. By virtue of him just being in these environments in nature with a TV crew, he is disrupting nature. The extent of which could be debated, but eating snakes, wrestling alligators, like, come on. The snake is just in its natural habitat, minding its f***ing business, and then this guy comes along and kills and eats it. For what? For TV ratings? It's just nauseating to me, and one of the main points of veganism is to not cause harm, especially when it's not necessary. It just takes it to a whole other level for me and really sickens me. I guess there was some controversy with the show because it was revealed that he actually stayed in a hotel on many of the nights that they were filming, where he would have had you believe he was sleeping in nature. It really shows just how unnecessary what he was doing was. He wasn't doing any of this out of necessity. He had a place, a warm, dry, safe place to sleep at night. He didn't need to sleep in nature. He didn't need to be in nature at all. Since then, he has had a bunch of other shows, but that one was definitely the most successful and how he became a household name. What's strange to me is that a lot of these headlines hinged on the fact that Bear used to be vegan and is now embarrassed about that. But to be honest, I really couldn't find much information about Bear Grylls being vegan in the past. The only thing that's really referenced is his 2015 cookbook, which was called Fuel for Life. He himself called this a vegan cookbook. According to the cover of that cookbook, it was dairy, wheat, and sugar-free recipes, which feels very 2015 diet culture to me. I couldn't find a table of contents or any other recipes other than a salad. I'm sure it was mostly, if not entirely, vegan recipes, but it also seems like if the cookbook was vegan, it was sort of incidentally so. It just seems like it was more centered on diet and health benefits rather than any kind of moral stance on veganism. I did find an article on Totally Vegan Buzz where they quoted something that he said in that book, which was, "Many people think I must be a massive meat eater. I'm not. To satisfy our insatiable appetite for meat, we have developed very unnatural ways of breeding, keeping, and killing animals. This far exceeds our nutritional needs for the health of myself and my family." This is kind of like softcore veganism to me. He's saying something, but he's not saying much. Sort of like a whisper of a vegan message here, but done in a way so as not to ostracize or piss off meat eaters. So let's get into his interview and these articles. There is a Daily Mail article that was pretty extensive and sort of broke down all the main points from the interview. The headline of the Daily Mail article was, "Bear Grylls says he's, quote, embarrassed that he ever promoted veganism, and now shuns veggies completely in favor of red meat. The subheading is, Grylls 48 insists his blood and bone marrow diet is much better for his health. Nutrition experts slammed both his, quote, unhelpful comments and food choices. I was pretty surprised to see this subheading in the Daily Mail, especially after the article that I mentioned in my video last week, where they were like, vegan school lunches actually aren't as healthy as people think they are. Daily Mail, who are you? Like, where do you stand? What do you stand for? The answer is nothing and everything all at once. Alright, so Bear is quoted as saying, I was vegan quite a few years ago. In fact, I wrote a vegan cookbook, and I feel a bit embarrassed because I really promoted that. I thought that was good for the environment, and I thought it was good for my health. And through time and experience and knowledge and study, I realized I was wrong on both counts. The Daily Mail then goes on to fact check him on this point. They say, the negative effect of the meat industry on the environment is well documented. A study published in Nature Food in 2021 found meat accounts for nearly 60% of all greenhouse gases from global food production and causes twice the pollution of production of plant-based foods. Bear then goes on to talk about palm and soy oil, but the father of three believes that one of the worst things for the environment is food that contains palm oil and soy oil. It's terrible for the environment, strips rainforests, and kills a ton of animals in the process, he said. He's also not impressed with processed vegetarian and vegan food that contains seed oils. I used to think they were brilliant, he said. And then I started looking at the ingredients and just thought, hold on, this is horrific. This is so processed, and it's full of seed oils. This seed oil topic, I've noticed, has become a big carnivore talking point, just a big talking point on social media in general. And I'll just say, whenever there's a big talking point like this, I do always wonder who was originally behind it or what was originally behind it. In this case, I honestly don't know, but I did find this article from the Harvard School of Public Health from June 2022 discussing the seed oil myth. The article was called Scientists Debunk Claims of Seed Oil Health Risks. While the internet may be full of posts stating that seed oils such as canola and soy are, quote, toxic, scientific evidence does not support these claims, according to experts. While it's true that many foods that use seed oils, such as packaged snacks and French fries, are unhealthy, they also tend to be high in refined carbohydrates, sodium, and sugar. Sure, if you cut back on these foods, chances are you're going to feel better. But these other components, not the seed oils themselves, are the culprit behind weight gain and other negative health outcomes. This article in Consumer Reports goes more deeply into the seed oil myths and debunking them, and they quote a lot of science-based evidence and experts. The seed oil thing, it kind of just seems like a case of correlation being confused with causation and just being sensationalized on social media, people running with it. And this is also a case of vegan food being somehow inextricably tied to seed oils. There's this implication in a lot of these circles that veganism automatically means eating a ton more processed foods, which for some people, sure, it can mean that. But I would argue that anyone living in a westernized country has a potential of eating more packaged and processed foods, not just vegans. In fact, many people would say that the healthiest and most recommended version of a vegan diet is one that contains only whole plant foods. There is this fallacy in the carnivore versus vegan debate that carnivore diet equals healthy, whole, unprocessed, vegan diet equals processed. And that's just an untrue generalization. Also, the irony in Bear being concerned about the environment and the animals being harmed and killed for the harvesting of soy and palm oils, but not at all concerned about the environment and animals being harmed and killed for him to consume their flesh and organs, it's just some old-fashioned cognitive dissonance. The guy's allowed to eat a carnivore diet if that's what he wants to eat, but don't bring up animals and the environment suffering as one of your main reasons. That just doesn't make any sense at all. For the last 2 years, Grylls has been trying to eat natural food, just like our millennia of ancestors would have eaten for hundreds of thousands of years. So Bear seems to be in support of the Ancestral diet, which seems to have really gained popularity in the last few years, has become very trendy. You know, we've gone from Atkins diet to paleo diet to keto diet to carnivore diet to caveman diet to ancestral diet. These animal-heavy product diets have been rebranded upwards of 10 times in the last 20 years, and I just want to point out, that a vegan diet has been called a vegan diet for the better part of a century now. Purported benefits of the ancestral diet include reducing consumption of processed foods and increasing consumption of whole nutrient-dense foods, but these things aren't unique to an ancestral diet. They could be applied to many different diets, including a vegan diet. He claims that since ditching vegetables in favor of blood and bone marrow, he feels the strongest he has ever felt, and that his skin and gut have never been better. Do you ever notice that these people who undergo dramatic diet transformations always speak in hyperbole?
I tried salmon. I had 8 ounces of salmon one night, and I woke up the next morning with 0 congestion and 0 brain fog, 0 migraine, 0 lack of clarity. I felt the best that I had in probably like 3 years.
The Fox News article actually even drew the comparison to the Alyse Parker video. Former vegan influencer Alyse Parker similarly remarked on the benefits of switching from an all-vegan diet to the carnivore diet back in 2019. "I swallowed my pride and decided to give it a shot," she said. "Full-on carnivore. I woke up the next morning feeling more mentally clear, focused, wholesome, and healthy than I had felt in years." If you guys are new to my channel, I did make a parody of her video back in 2019. It is very funny if I do say so myself. I will link it above. I mean, you should maybe watch at least part of her video first to fully understand and appreciate the parody. Always be wary of people who tout something as the best they've ever felt, especially when they're trying to sell you something, and especially when this new lifestyle is a major pivot from a former lifestyle in which they also claimed they felt the best they ever felt. I think a lot of times these people are just high on the dopamine of trying something new and they're just really excited and fired up about it. I also want to say, never trust someone's diet advice if they have ditched veggies completely. No matter what diet you do, just please don't ever ditch vegetables. They're very healthy. They're very essential. Such an important part of a well-balanced diet. So whatever you eat, just don't ditch vegetables. The Daily Mail article goes on to surprisingly quote a few nutrition researchers and experts who are actually in favor of a vegan diet and who criticize Bear for setting a bad example to the public. They point out that a balanced vegan diet is very healthy and that there is convincing data that high meat intake increases risk of cancer, and that plant-based foods are the only food sources of vitamin C and fiber. Tucked away at the end of the article, we get the real beans and tofu of the interview. But Grylls, who is a spokesperson for beef organ supplements, Ancestral supplements, claims he has been reaping the rewards of his meat-heavy diet. So here we have it, the missing piece of the puzzle, the financial incentive for him to voice his opinions in this way. I looked into Ancestral supplements, not knowing much about them, and it turns out that they are owned by Brian Johnson, who's more well known as the Liver King. I'm sure many of you know about the Liver King, but if you don't, I think the name tells you everything you need to know. And Bear Grylls is a spokesperson for Ancestral supplements. He posted what was clearly an ad for them on Twitter in March of this year. What's interesting is that it wasn't tagged as an ad, which definitely seems to go against FTC guidelines, as we discussed in the Got Milk video. He also posted the video to his Instagram. Again, no ad disclosure, so there's definitely some funny business going on. I'm not sure that the FTC would appreciate that. Ancestral Supplements sells products like kidney, beef liver, and beef brain in supplement form. Clearly, Bear is financially incentivized to promote a carnivore diet. That's who he's currently trying to sell products to, is fellow followers of a carnivore diet. That's who is buying and taking these supplements. This is the one. This is the version of me that you should believe. Until a few years from now when there's a whole new version, and then you should believe him and buy whatever he's selling. But for now, believe me and buy what I'm selling. Now let's get to the part of the article that I found the most concerning, if you can believe it. And since switching to a red meat focused diet, Grylls claims he no longer craves junk and slammed his previous plant-based diet as such an unhealthy way to live. "I was having salads every day. I would really crave junk food and once or twice a week have cheat meals, a real blowout of whatever you want. Burgers, pizzas, etc. You're basically starving for 80% of the time, and then you're binging for the rest. That's not good for the body." What bothers me the most about these no longer vegan narratives is the person's complete lack of ability to take ownership and accountability for the fact that they were eating in an unhealthy and unsustainable way. We see this time and time again with the no longer vegan stories. They can't have done anything wrong. Nothing can possibly be their fault. Therefore, it must be the fault of the vegan diet. What I see from the above quote is someone who was calorically depriving themselves. He literally said he was starving 80% of the time and mostly eating salads. That's not normal. It's not a requirement of a vegan diet to be hungry all the time. And if you are, you're doing something wrong. This mentality of deprive and then binge is more a reflection of toxic diet culture. It's not a reflection on veganism at all. It's a direct outcome of failing to take care of one's nutritional needs. Whether that's not eating enough, not eating enough protein, not getting enough carbs, it's a user error. And I, for one, am sick of veganism being blamed for user error. Alyse Parker was a raw vegan. Her channel was called Raw Alignment. And I think toward the end, she did start eating more cooked foods. And I'm not saying that there's not a healthy way to be a raw vegan. I'm sure that there is. But if you watch her old What I Eat in a Day videos, she was not eating what most people would consider to be a healthy or a balanced or a sustainable vegan diet. For the most part, it just seemed like she wasn't eating enough food. So it's really no surprise when she started feeling so much better when she started eating animal products, because what she was eating was essentially a bastardization of a vegan diet. For Bear Grylls to say with confidence, you're basically starving 80% of the time and then binging for the rest, as if that's the definition of a vegan diet, is such a deranged and shocking misrepresentation of veganism. There's zero accountability that he was essentially undereating. You know, someone who has become rich and famous off of being an authority on something is going to have a hard time admitting that they did anything wrong, because it's almost like they're afraid that then their authority on everything will get called into question. Let's also clarify something else. Bear was eating a plant-based diet. With Bear Grylls, it's all about physical performance. It's all about how he's feeling physically, and that's fine, but let's be clear that he was never promoting veganism. He was never vegan. He was never someone who took a stance against the mistreatment of animals in our food system in any kind of meaningful way. Sure, maybe give a few sound bites here and there because it made him look good. In my opinion, no one who is vegan for the animals and truly understands what that means would ever go on to say that they were embarrassed by having done that. I've discussed this before, that I'm not someone who really believes in gatekeeping the word vegan. I think it oftentimes does more harm than good. But in these cases where we have public figures misusing, abusing, and then discarding veganism when it no longer serves them, that is something that certainly does way more harm than good, and that I feel completely comfortable calling out. In conclusion, it seems like these certain types of extreme public figures tend to make extreme lifestyle changes. And with these changes often come these huge media frenzies and lots of buzz, and with these changes often come financial incentives. You know, Alyse Parker with ButcherBox, Bear Grylls with Ancestral supplements. In this way, it's almost like it becomes a financial strategy. You know, swing really far to this way, make money off of these people, and then swing really far in the opposite direction and make money off of these people who are thrilled to support you, because not only are you with them now, but you've also ditched these people over here who they don't like. After looking into this topic more, it sort of surprised me that the big headline grabber here was that Bear Grylls was embarrassed that he ever promoted veganism. Please correct me if I'm wrong, point me in the right direction if I'm missing something. But it doesn't seem like he ever really did promote veganism. If I were being conspiratorial, I would say that this was all just this kind of elaborate PR strategy to promote the Ancestral supplements. But there's just no way of knowing for sure. This type of stuff is about as murky as the snake-infested waters that Bear Grylls loves to trample through. Let me know your thoughts on all of this. Bear Grylls, his vegan past, his carnivore present. Thank you again to Nikki for the suggestion. Send me any other topics that you think I might like to cover. You can either comment them here or message me on Instagram. Really appreciate you guys checking out this video. Give it a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Subscribe for more of my content, and I'll see you again soon. Bye!